All right, good evening, and thank you all for tuning into another episode of the Professional Pricing Society podcast. My name is Terrence, and we do have another great episode in store for you all today. Pricing thought leader Per Chauffeurs will be taking the time to discuss with us holistic approaches to pricing, which are also thoughts from his latest book, The Price Whisperer, a holistic approach to pricing power. Per, how you doing today?
I'm very well, Terrence, and I'm happy to be on the show. I hope it's going to be not only informative but also entertaining a little bit for the audience and for you too. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Good. So let's dive right into it. Go ahead and tell us a bit about your background and really what the pricing power means to you as it pertains to your career.
Yeah, the so the story here, and I think this is important for the context, is that I uh, first of all, I got the moniker the pricing power because people started to call me the price whisper, and
Nice.
um, and um, and because I got a wacky name, I decided to adopt it. So
Sure, why not?
but the story here is that I ran a couple of companies in Europe before I moved here to the US, and came here to establish and run a division of a fairly large public company, and then I had another 4 CEO positions. And in all of these instances, we did experiments with pricing. Some of those experiments were very successful, others were complete duds, and most of them were simply inconclusive, right? Um, and what I mean with having a successful pricing experiment meant that the next quarter revenues would be up like 25%.
Mm,
And we couldn't understand why some of those experiments worked and others didn't. And what I had learned in business school and what I could read about pricing was so theoretical and so academic that it was really useless information.
mm,
So 15 years ago, when I decided I was too old and too opinionated to be a hired gun, it was time for me to set up my own company and take that interest in pricing that I had and develop a process to make every pricing experiment a success.
mm,
And that is what we do in my company. And it is all about providing our clients a methodology to gain pricing power. And pricing power is a term that was coined by Warren Buffett.
mhm,
And he said that the most important criterion for investing in a company is whether they have pricing power.
mm,
And he then continued to say that, and pricing power is the ability to increase prices and not lose sales volume.
mm.
And
Right.
that's the holy grail, eh?
Yeah, yeah. That makes perfect sense. Okay. So when you think about the term pricing power, how does a holistic approach tie into that? What does a holistic approach mean in that regard?
Well, the we have to look at pricing power is something that a company earns, right?
Mhm,
You cannot just increase prices and believe that it's going to work, right? Sometimes, if you're well underpriced, yes, you can, um, but many times not. And what I mean with the earning the right to have pricing power is about understanding how everything that you do in your company affects your pricing power or lack thereof.
mhm,
And that means that the way you target your customers affects uh, affects your pricing power, because you do want to target your customers that has a higher willingness to pay and therefore support higher prices than
mhm,
another customer segment, right? So you need to know what your
mhm,
customer segment are willing to pay so you can focus on the most desirable one.
mm,
Um, you need to know how the features and functions of your product or your service affects what people are willing to pay for it,
mm,
right? And if you know what they're willing to pay, you can make sure that you have the best product to market fit. You can make sure that you, in your promotion and in your marketing, you're using the features and functions that support higher prices than other features, functions, and benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, you need to understand your marketing. What marketing channels, what marketing messages, what marketing methodologies leads to attracts potential customers that has a higher willingness to pay than other marketing channels, than other messages, than other methodologies. And the same with sales. And again, you need to understand what sales channels and sales methodologies and so forth leads to a higher willingness to pay, and who the customers are who have that higher willingness to pay, again supporting higher prices. And finally, you also need to know again the how to stratify your pricing in such a way that it minimizes sales friction and maximize your revenues and your profitability, or possibly your sales volume if that's important for you. But profits are more important than sales volume.
Sure.
So unless you understand, and this is the holistic view, understand customer segmentation, understand product to market fit, understand marketing, understand sales, and understand pricing strategy all together, means that you can elevate companies to really to the next level. We're not talking about a few percent here and there. We're talking about doubling sales volume, right? Or doubling revenue or more, right? So it's transformative for a company, completely transformative. That doesn't mean that you should not do some of the other stuff that is also important, like sales transaction analysis and price waterfalls and so forth. But the problem with all of those is that they are backward looking. You know, if you do take that holistic approach, it's forward looking. So and like I said, it transforms companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just listed a number of different components that companies can use to gain this holistic approach to possessing pricing power. One of the things you mentioned was honing in on the customers that have the willingness to pay a little bit more. Now, how can they measure the trust, behind that, or the result behind companies that are consumers that are willing to pay more?
Well, it's actually not only consumers; it's the same in business to business. We we think we do rational buying decisions, especially in business to business, but we're not. All purchase decisions are emotional.
Sure.
And then we put rationale on top of it to justify the decision for ourselves.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that when I started up my own company here, I developed a methodology to that makes every pricing experiment a success, and this is to understand how all of these variables affects willingness to pay, and therefore affects how you can price. And there are methods, and this is done in online polling of a marketplace, and that could be a B2B marketplace, or it could be a consumer marketplace. And the methodologies that are out there are not good enough. So we developed our own, and we also developed our own AI software that analyzes the data we capture from the market. And is it dependable? Well, I have more than 700 customers that said, yeah, it worked perfectly, right? And I have customers that says things like, yeah, Per, you helped us 10x our company. You helped us 5x our company. You helped us increase revenue with 400%, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a unsolicited email from a customer a couple of weeks ago, and it was a screenshot from his accounting system, and I could
Nice.
see that his sales volume was down a few percent, and his margin was up 49%, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and his message was very short. He said, "Less work, more money. Many thanks."
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. Cool. That's
So,
really good. Now, how should a company implement these learnings from willingness to pay research?
well,
Good.
I think you're bringing up something that is very important, and first of all, it needs to the processes that needs to be implemented need to come from the top of the company. It needs to come from really from the CEO, or certainly the
Mm,
C level if it's a very large company. But it's all, every company have sort of a gut feeling about the market. They have a gut feeling of corporate gut feeling of why people buy, why they don't buy, what they're willing to pay, and so forth.
mhm,
And if the company have salespeople, they have a gut feeling that is they are being grind down, right? Because they hear day in and day out that your product or your service is not as good as competition, and it's more expensive, right?
mm,
So the the most important thing is that the company organizes um, training programs,
okay.
because everybody who's in sales know the proverb buyer liar, right?
Mm,
So don't believe when you're trying to sell something to somebody. Don't believe what they say. Don't believe what their willingness to pay is, because some of these buyers will lie outright. Some will simply withhold information, and some will be truthful, of course. But for salespeople to hear that day in and day out, they get grind down. So they need to understand what companies or what their clients really are willing to pay. Marketing needs to understand, they need to be trained on understand what channels and messages really support that higher willingness to pay and support higher prices.
mhm,
Product management need to know what feature functions and benefits that supports higher prices than other feature functions and benefits.
mm,
Um, and and the same same with the sales organization. The need to know not only what customers are willing to pay, but what they're willing to pay more for, right?
mm,
And obviously um, there's a lot of discussions, and we talk about value pricing, right? Well, unless you understand from the market what they value, it's just guesswork.
mm,
you know
yeah.
if you as a company try to figure out what value your product or service gives a company, you can make assumptions, and assumptions is another word for guessing. It may be a educated guess, but it's still a guess, right?
Mhm, yep.
And instead, if you measure what people actually say they're willing to pay, you have how they value that product or service, and it's
Okay.
not guessing anymore,
Mhm.
right?
So you're saying that's a survey that you have
Yeah,
to
it's
ask?
survey based. Yeah, online surveys. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
and
That makes sense.
and people say one of the questions I get um, very often is, how can we trust the result? How
Mm-hmm.
can we trust that you talk to the right people?
Mm-hmm.
And again, we have devised a process that in a very sneaky way
Mm-hmm.
disqualifies people who we don't want to talk to, because obviously garbage in, garbage out.
Yep. Yep.
And when we do these projects, we often disqualify 95 to 98% of people who start a survey.
Wow.
Okay, because we want to talk to the right people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 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 um, and and then we have our I mentioned our AI software called predicted demand analysis, or predicted sales analysis, and we in that we can see how people answer the survey, and we can see if they're lying, and the software can assess if they're lying. Their data got kicked out and not used for the analysis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing coming from, you guys developed your own software
Yeah.
to be able to detect these type of things and to be able to, have this type of insider knowledge to be able to share to others. That's amazing.
But remember, I started to say that it all came from my experience running companies,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and from my very early interest in pricing and pricing mistakes I did, you know. But the very first company I established and ran, we priced ourselves really low,
Mm.
and I sold through a channel, and eventually I realized that they were marking up our product to the Yahoo, you know.
Mm.
So they were making lots of money on our product, that was innovative and so forth, um, and um, and we were struggling because we were pricing ourselves too low. We didn't have
Yep.
enough profits, to be
Yep.
honest, you know.
Yep.
So so that was one of the mistakes I did, you know, and and then we did other experiments that worked really well, you know. That one I remember was, this is professional electronics, and we went to a trade show, and the everybody said you should not have prices on your products on the trade show. We put prices on our product on the trade show,
Mm-hmm.
and and I had people coming up to me saying that I thought I'd never afford this product, but now I can see I clearly can.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know.
Just being upright and honest with them.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and I remember when I moved here then to the States, the I said I established and ran a division of a fairly large public company, and also professional electronics, and we developed the product, and the CEO of the company said we're going to price this at $1,100, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just out of thin air, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I said no, it's going to be 3,800.
Mm.
And you know, we I don't know how much did we sell of that. I think over a 2 year period we sold about 45 million of that, right?
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So and that was really from scratch, you know. So but you can imagine having a 15% margin versus having a 400% margin made a little bit of difference on the
Yeah.
bottom line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure any company in their right mind would, love to have those type of numbers and, regarding their increase. So
Yeah.
as it pertains to, you just recently had a book, your latest book,
Yes.
Price Whisperer, A Holistic Approach to Pricing Power. You go over these different components to possessing a holistic approach
Yes, I
to
do. Yes.
for
Yeah.
companies. Okay, so
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about your book.
Well, I'll tell you the I've done a lot of white papers and articles
Hmm.
and all different publications. I've been published in Forbes and Inc. and New York Times and all different, you know, Financial Times, all different um, publications like that,
Hmm.
and so I thought to myself that I should have a book, right? And
Sure.
I said, well, why don't I take all these white papers and all these articles and just put it in a big document and write some glue around it, right?
Mm.
It didn't work that way. It didn't work that way. I had to I had to rewrite just about everything in the book,
Oh wow.
and but it goes into a lot of detail on exactly what I've been talking about here, on
Hmm.
how a company can gain that holistic approach,
Mm,
and how it can leverage a better understanding of the market's willingness to pay,
mm,
segmented in the way I've described here,
sure.
to elevate themselves, to elevate the company to the next level.
Mm,
And we're getting a lot of our business from private equity groups, or rather the portfolio companies to private equity groups.
hmm
And I don't know if the audience know much about private equity, but they typically buy companies, or buy a very large chunk or a majority of a company, and they sort of turn them around.
mm,
And what they typically say is that they call something the hold time. Means they want to turn around the company and then hold the company for between 3 to 5 years and then sell it at a profit.
hmm
And I have private equity groups saying that, well, Perry, you lowered the hold time from 5 years to a year and a half. So thank you very much.
Wow. Wow.
you know.
So yeah, you have plenty of proof that your strategies and methodologies have
Oh
been
yeah.
working very well.
Oh yeah. I spoke to a CEO of a company we worked for, in a very niche market.
Hmm
We worked for them with a project this spring, and he basically said, "Well, Per, um, pricing saved our rear behind this year."
Sure. Sure.
you know, and so he's happy, and he's one of these private equity group owned companies. So he's about to exit that and start
hmm
the next journey to next private equity group company.
Well, awesome. Well, Per, I want to thank you so much for your time today, sharing your knowledgeable insights about pricing power and holistic approaches. Can you please share with us where viewers and listeners can retrieve any of your materials or resources?
Yeah, the absolute best way is simply to just do a Google search for the Price Whisper.
Hmm
You'll find me, you'll find my company, you'll find my YouTube channel, you find um, lots of the publications I've done.
hmm
You will also find a company called Redfin that had a service to value your house, that they
hmm
also call the Price Whisper. Um, but um, but that's the easiest way to find me. You can also go to my last name, showforce.com,
Okay.
or you can go to thepricewhisper.me, and that
Okay.
also finds me. So,
All right. So you have
and I
multiple.
would encourage people to go to Amazon and get my book, because it's I've gotten a tremendous feedback from people who have read it. So
Okay. Awesome. If you are somebody that's looking to get more information about holistic approaches to pricing power, I want to encourage you all to please look into purchasing Mr. Chauffeur's latest book, The Price Whisper: A Holistic Approach to Pricing Power. Outside of that, thank you so much, good sir, for spending time to speak with me today about your latest book and of course your expertise in the field. So I appreciate that.
thank you so much, Terence, and I hope this was good for you, and I hope it was good for the listeners. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Absolutely.